to the Common Sense Show with myself, Celeste Maddox, and Luke Davis. Say hi, Luke.
Hey, how are you doing? I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, we have a special guest in studio today. We have Zach Walker. Welcome, Zach.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. It is a pleasure to have you. So you are the city manager.
That's right.
For the city of Independence. For those of you that don't know where we are in Independence, Missouri. And I know Luke is chomping at the bit to ask Zach a bunch of questions, but I want to get one in.
Sure, do it now.
First, I'm going to do it now while I have a gap. So, Zach, in 250 words or less, if somebody comes to the city and has an issue with the city and says, "I want to talk to the manager," is it you that they talk to? Is it are you fielding all of the problems that people bring up with the city?
Potentially. We try to solve problems as close to the people as we can. Mm-hmm. So we've tried to really push decision making and accountability into the organization. So, we'll try to have folks work out their issues with some of our frontline staff or even, a department head. But if an issue gets to be particularly contentious or needs some, weighing in on it, then, I would get involved with trying to help sort that out.
Ah, okay. And what's your favorite part about being our city manager?
I love the community. I love that there are people across this community who are passionate about independence, who want to make this the best city it can be. It makes my job so much easier when you have willing people who are optimistic, energetic, and engaged about their community.
Awesome. That's definitely something that I've picked up, coming into Independence, just how passionate people are about the place that they live in. So how long have you been the city manager?
I have been the city manager for 7 years now.
Oh, wow. Okay. What did you do before this, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, so generally I started my local government career in Kansas City. They have a fellowship program for folks who've just graduated with their master's in public administration. And then once that program was done, I worked in their budget office for 3 years. And when I came to Independence, I served as the internal auditor for the city. And then I became the assistant city manager. And October 2016, I was named the city manager.
Wow, quite a journey.
It has been.
Very interesting. Well, I know today that we're going to we have you in for a purpose. Obviously we're a show that talks about money. And we are just curious about the city budgeting process as a whole. And I know Luke's got a lot of questions regarding that.
I'm kind of a political wonk, and I'm going to try to stay away from all of the politics and all of that kind of stuff and just really dive down into the strategies you use from a financial standpoint. Because I can only imagine that managing a budget as large as Independence's is, with as many challenges that municipalities are facing post-COVID, has to be it has to be both challenging and a little bit difficult. And just wanted to hear a little bit about what your role is in the financial aspects of Independence, and what you do to go about making sure budgets are balanced and all that kind of stuff. So tell me a little bit about what you do on the financial side of Independence.
Yeah, so the city management profession was really born out of the machine politics of the early 1900s.
Pendergast and all that kind of stuff.
all of that.
Sure.
And the idea was having somebody who was, above reproach, who was hired by the mayor and city council to run day-to-day affairs and make sure that budgets were managed in a responsible way, that contracts were awarded in a fair, above-board way, things of that nature. So from a budgetary perspective, I would say the most important thing I do is make sure each and every year that the city's budget is balanced. We're not like the federal government where
just
we can
print
rack
as much
up.
as you
That's
want.
right.
Sure.
That's right. We have to adopt a balanced budget every year.
Amazing concept.
Yeah, and it does force those hard choices, just like all of us in our personal lives. I have to make sure the basic services of the city are funded in such a way to care for the needs of the community, care for the employees, and that our wages and benefits are competitive enough to recruit and retain a highly functional staff. And also try to work in as many of the priorities and projects that matter to the mayor and city council as well.
You mentioned that you're kind of and correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of serve as is it a liaison between the public facing side of things, the mayors and all of that, and the city workers and the city government as a whole? Are you kind of in between those things in a lot of ways?
Very well said. I operate in that gap. So, you have very highly trained, qualified staff who have engineering degrees and law
Sure.
degrees and all these professional backgrounds, and mayors and council members who, have their own backgrounds and they
Right.
don't
Talking.
speak that jargon, right?
Right.
So I have to kind of serve as that translator between the two parties and find that balance between what is politically acceptable but also administratively sustainable.
And so you're not elected in any way, right? Are you appointed by the council? Is that how that kind of works?
In our city charter, which is just like our constitution, but here at the local level, it sets out that form of government, and the manager is hired by the mayor and city council. Takes 5 votes to hire somebody, and then you serve at the pleasure of the mayor and council, and so they have the ability to remove the manager if they feel like that's necessary.
That's great. So I get all that background out of the way just so I can kind of understand. I would think that in Independence, particularly around COVID and post-COVID, that you've had to deal with a lot of changes to the revenue that comes in, to the cost of things, that you've had to make a lot of adjustments to the overall financial execution of the city of Independence. What does that look like? What are some of the things that you've had to help kind of change in order to make this city, like the balances budget, or budgets balanced, like you said?
Yeah, historically the city's budget was built on a bedrock of sales tax revenue.
Yeah.
For the longest time,
Retail.
Independence was the retail sales hub of certainly eastern Jackson County and really probably a larger territory as well, and that served us well for a long time. Then 2 things happened. The first was these other municipalities woke up and started developing their own commercial developments, which stopped the loss of their sales tax, retail sales, and then the rise of e-commerce, more and more consumers shopping online, which meant a diversion of revenues away from traditional brick and mortar stores. So that has necessitated really some rethinking of how we do business. It certainly changes our economic development approach, but it also has required some difficult choices in our spending. For example, there was a time that if you worked for the city for 5 years, you vested in the city's health insurance plan for life, as if you were an active employee.
For life.
And
Wow.
your dependents. So if you had a spouse, even a surviving spouse,
Not even until 65 in Medicare, just for life.
for life,
Wow.
right?
Yeah. Wow.
That was obviously not a sustainable benefit. Certainly a very emotional issue, but one that required us to have some tough conversations and issues. I would say the compromise we came to is starting in 2018, new hires to the city don't accrue that benefit. And people that were hired between 2012 and 2018, you have to work 20 years if you want to accrue that benefit. And then we're kind of just living out the folks who came prior to that. So certainly we have the city on a better track, but that will take some time. But that's one example of the kind of tough decisions that are necessitated to keep up with the times and what's happening in the economy around us.
So, you talked about the kind of fall of brick and mortar retail that I think we see no matter where you're living throughout the country or the world. You're seeing that kind of transition over to e-commerce. What replaces that revenue? Where do you have to pivot to stay a thriving community?
You have to look for opportunities wherever you can get them. So that is the importance of more of the industrial development that we're bringing, particularly to the east side of the community that has been historically underdeveloped. Trying to bring in higher paying jobs in the manufacturing and industrial sectors, and again, the e-commerce and shipping sectors.
Distribution centers,
Distribution
things like that?
centers, all of that,
Gotcha.
yeah. So we've changed our approach of the type of business we're trying to bring to the community. But we've also had to look for creative ways to plug that gap. So, for example, there is the ability to tax online sales. I would say there's a healthy skepticism among the independent citizenry. So the first time we ran that issue just to replace our sales tax, that did not pass.
I remember.
Then we went back to the voters with a designated use, which was for our animal shelter and our police department. And that came with the caveat that once those two needs reached a certain threshold dollar amount, then those monies would flow or waterfall to their original sales tax use. So that has certainly helped, but it hasn't fully replaced the loss because, again, we have dedicated uses we have to satisfy first. We are in a brave new world now where we are taxing recreational marijuana.
Yeah.
So we are just looking for really any kind of opportunity to adjust to the world around us and try to plug those revenue gaps.
So, well, just broadly, we're saying, and, Luke and I were talking off air that it's a city budget, but there are some similarities to an individual budget. From your experience in these last 7 years that you've been there, what's been the biggest challenges in terms of like needs and wants? Where do you allocate the dollars? What do you have to take away from? What's been some of that balancing act for you?
Yeah, just like in our families, mom and dad have things they want, kids have things they want, and there's only so many dollars to go around. If you translate that to local government, you've got mayors and councils who run with some ideas in mind, projects they want to get done, things they want to accomplish. Balancing a budget isn't, the most exciting thing for them. They want projects, things that leave a mark and a permanent, change in the community. So trying to satisfy those, balance those needs. We have 900 city employees, and then we have about 70% of that workforce is represented by a public employee bargaining unit, who's expecting across the board wage increases, certain benefit packages. So trying to satisfy those demands. And then certainly 123,000 residents, there's expectations, and rightfully so, about certain quality of streets, sidewalks, parks, police and fire service. So trying to, all these different family members, if you will, to use the analogy, trying to make sure you satisfy as many of those needs through a lens of balanced budget.
Yeah, and it's like you said, with families struggle with this every day. It's kind of the question of increasing revenue or decreasing costs, or where that balance is between those things, and also then with what looking at what you have to spend for the must-haves versus the things you want. That's all part of whether it be a household's personal budget or a large city. Really, it's just adding extra zeros to the end of the numbers between those things, right?
That's exactly what it is. It's the same concept. It's just we're playing with a larger budget, but there are only so many dollars to go around. And then one of the tricky things, like in our personal life, we might get a large settlement in a class action lawsuit or some other one-time revenue. Well, it's very easy to look at all those zeros and say, I want to go hire a bunch of new staff or give a big raise. But you have to remember that is an ongoing expense. So, for all of us, if grandma gives us birthday money or, we get a bonus at work, we have to remember that that's one-time money and not creating that liability of an ongoing expenditure.
And that was something, you mentioned that I wanted to ask that question. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
With COVID during whether it be the later years of the Trump years or the early Biden years, there was a lot of money kind of going to local municipalities, states, whatever. So there's a lot of money just kind of dumped in people's laps, and I know a lot of people chose to use those funds to give raises, things that are kind of perpetual costs. Those dollars, I presume, are kind of drying up at this point.
They are starting the money that was sloshing around is really getting scarce now.
So did you all use those funds that you received? I presume you received quite a few of those as well. How did you go about stewarding those additional dollars in a wise way?
So there were really two different programs that brought federal dollars. The first was the CARES Act, and the lion's share of that, our council elected to use those funds to help pay delinquent utility accounts.
Okay.
So folks who maybe were out of work because businesses were shut down during COVID and were building up a delinquent account balance. So we infused about $9 million into
wow.
paying off delinquent utility accounts. 9 of our $11 million went towards that. With the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan, ARPA funds, we use those more for one-time upgrades, so getting much needed equipment for our police and fire departments, things like that. But the temptation was obviously very strong to try to use those for wage increases. But again, that creates an ongoing liability for
Right.
the extent of that employee's career, plus then their pension beyond their time with the city. So you have to be very thoughtful about making sure you're not creating a liability that you don't have those revenues for.
That's great.
Well, I know that
I know, you're
on
cutting
top
me
of
off.
I'm just
I can
keeping
see
my
it in your
eye on
eyes.
that clock. One more question for Zach, and this has been so interesting. I think we could talk for another 20 minutes at least. But one more thing. Now, you are the president of the Independence Rotary Club.
Yeah.
Or the Rotary Club of Independence this
Right.
year. Tell us how you find time for this and, what that means to you.
For myself, finding ways to stay involved in the community is really important to me. I want to give back to the community that's given so much to me, find different ways to affect change in the community. So it's a matter of priority, making sure that I am wise with my time and allocate it. But it's such a huge passion of mine that I just make it a priority.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Wise stewardship.
Well, and Zach, I just want to personally thank you. I thanked you off air, but I want to thank you on the air for taking time in your day, because I know how busy you are,
Yep.
to talk with us and share some of your insights from the world of finance with our listeners, because I think it really is important that people understand that whether it's a household budget or something larger, that the same principles of money management apply.
I'm happy to do it. Thank you for the opportunity. We are actually going into our annual budget process again now. So maybe this spring we get back together and talk a little bit more about it.
Would love that.
We would love to have you back. So that is all we have time for today. Thank you both very much. It's been really educational and informative. And we'll catch you again